Welcome to the Knicks Film School Postgame Show. Getting started a little bit later than usual because we had, break up Knicks Film School because we are on a winning streak. Our third straight winning watch party at T-Squared Social. Really nice turnout today. Thanks for everybody who showed up, many of whom brought their family members, as today was Friends and Family Day, for an afternoon start against an Atlanta Hawks team that has given the Knicks fits at times this year. I would say given the Knicks fits in every game this year because started off, it's really probably been, I would say that it's the Hawks have been their best regular season rival this year, just in terms of how close the games were. The first game came down to the wire. The Knicks had, I think it was a 5 or 6 point lead with 2.5 minutes left. Blew that lead. One of their very early dispiriting losses. The next game after that, of course, was the NBA Cup game, which was probably up until that point in the season the most distressing loss because the Knicks had a lead going into the third quarter and then completely and totally fell apart. And then the last two games have certainly been better. I would say one of the most encouraging games of the season, and a game that I said at the time feels like maybe they found something here, and it turns out they did because they went on a nice little run, was the third Hawks game of the season. One ended up winning kind of convincingly, but that was a close game throughout. Had to make a lot of big plays. And then the most recent game, which was a complete and total circus. I think I forget if it was the first game before or after the All-Star break, one or the other. I forget which was the Bulls game and which was the Hawks game. In any case, came down to the final possession. Georges Niang had a chance to win it at the buzzer. He missed. All led up to today. So I think going into today, no Jalen Brunson. We're going to get back to that in a moment. I certainly was expecting a close game, being in Atlanta, being that the Hawks are very, very much playing for something. They are playing for home court advantage in the play-in game, which it looks like it's probably going to wind up featuring them against the Orlando Magic. I would imagine the Hawks would like to host that game. I think I don't like... We'll talk about how the Knicks opponents have been generally in terms of the quality of the opponents and Jalen Brunson's absence. But this was yet another game where even though you wouldn't say this was a top tier opponent or even a playoff caliber opponent, this was a decent basketball team, this Hawks team. And they have been capable of winning games all year. I mean, they had 36 wins coming into today. You can't luck into 36 wins in the NBA, even with all the tanking that's been going on lately. So the fact that the Knicks came out and really, I know the final score obviously is 121-105, but that's only because the Knicks scored 13 points in the fourth quarter because they shot 5 for 19 and the game was over going into the fourth and they kind of ran out of gas a little bit. This was an evisceration. It was an evisceration of a team that not only has given you fits all year, but that can do some very specific things to fluster you, and they did specific things to fluster the Knicks even when Jalen Brunson was healthy and in the lineup. So you take Jalen Brunson out of the lineup, and all of a sudden, well, now you have Dyson Daniels to go deploy on somebody else. And so the fact that the Knicks came out and played like they played today, I think in what might be the last game they play, hopefully, knock on wood, the last game they play without Jalen Brunson this year, although they do have one more back-to-back, so you figure Jalen will sit out one of those ends of the back-to-back. That'll still get him to 65 games for the year and obviously qualify him for all the postseason awards. But Jalen Brunson's coming back tomorrow. So I think there was some symbolism today in how the Knicks went into this game and took care of business and took all of the things that the Hawks usually do to fluster them and kind of turn the tables on them. And I think you could look at that on the defensive end of the floor in what was like, we're going to talk about the offense, and there were some big time offensive performances in this game. But all season long, the Hawks have had their way with the Knicks in pick and roll coverage or in pick and roll against Cat, who usually plays in drop. Well, today you saw Cat up at the level for pretty much the entire game, with hard hedges against Jalen or against Trae Young, and then going and retreating and trusting the back line of the defense to hold up And you look at Trae Young's final stat line, 5 of 15 from the field, 16 points. He was a minus 22. He had 9 assists because he's always going to get his assists, but also 3 turnovers. This was far from a good Trae Young game. And I love the fact that they switched up the coverage after Trae Young has really been having his way with the Knicks all year. Did the Knicks get a little lucky in terms of the Hawks maybe not making as many threes as they potentially could have? Sure, the Hawks shot 31% from downtown. We'll get to how well the Knicks shot it in a second. But I thought a lot of that was some really good Knicks defense. And you never know what you're going to get on these Saturday afternoon games. And then on the offensive end, the Hawks have been very willing to switch liberally because they have a big in Onyeka Okongwu, who's a pretty good switch guy, and they have a lot of size and length throughout the rest of their roster. Zachary Risache is a big guy. Mohamed Gay is a big guy. We saw him block Karl-Anthony Towns at the rim. He's, I don't know if they consider him their power forward, if they consider him their small forward, but he's a big dude. And then, of course, you got Dyson Daniels, who might win Defensive Player of the Year. And then you could bring some like switch-ish-y guys off the bench. Terrence Mann, George, the minivan, Georges Niang. We saw him matched up on Karl-Anthony Towns a couple times. And the Knicks, and this will be the transition to the next part of this conversation, which is the Knicks' big guns took on that defensive coverage and they said, this is what you're going to do against us? Well, we'll show you. And I have to start with OG Anunoby. I know OG did not, in terms of efficiency and in terms of his final point total, equal or get to where Karl-Anthony Towns got to. But OG Anunoby's first half against the Hawks, and really we could say for the second consecutive game, OG Anunoby in the first half was, without even considering anything that he did on the defensive end, was an all-star caliber player. And if you want to go back now over the last 9 games, I mean, really, you could stretch it back over the last 16, 17 games, because this has been, go back that far. I mean, he's averaging, I think, 22 or 23 points a game over that long stretch. Over the last 8 or 9, it's around 27. So he's definitely picked it up. And you could see this coming. You could see it coming because right from the start, when Jalen Brunson went out, and we're going to get to Tom Thibodeau's comments after the game, which I found quite interesting. Shout out to Fred Katz for asking that question. Anyway, right from the start, when Brunson went out, and it was clear that OG was going to take it a little bit more upon himself to shepherd the offense, he started shooting more threes. More importantly, he started driving. And sometimes it was ugly. There would be some unsightly turnovers, and there would be some shot attempts that just looked like it's like he got 80, 85, 90% of the way there. And then he just didn't have that last bit, that last part of the package to start finishing, or to be finishing some of these tough looks in traffic, even at his size and even with that power and even with the skill that he clearly has. And now all of a sudden over these last, I mean, you could say the last 8, 9 games, but I think he's even reached another level in these last 2. And I know he's slowed a little bit down the stretch, but OG Anunoby in the first half of this game was 6 of 9 from the field for 16 points. He was perfect from behind the arc, got to the line a bunch of times, or a few times, and threw some exceptional passes for assists. That's the other part. His playmaking has really taken a step up. He may not get a ton of assists. He ended up with 4 on the day, but the quality of those passes are very high. I think of all of the takeaways that you can have from this Brunson-less stretch, I mean, OG Anunoby has to be number 1 with a bullet, because the player that we are seeing right now is the perfect third option on a championship caliber team, because it is very clear that he doesn't need to work off of the gravity of others to make this happen. Yeah, having Karl-Anthony Towns out on the floor and to a lesser extent Mikal Bridges on the floor, that makes life a little bit easier, sure. But OG Anunoby is doing this stuff like this is his version of self-creation. And I think this is translatable to pretty much any other scenario. We know the defense is going to be there. The shooting, more or less, it seems like it's going to be there, especially since he's made kind of a leap all season long from above the break, where he's just eminently comfortable taking threes now. But the way he is finishing and the way that he is getting all the way to the rim and able to power through contact in a way that he has never been able to do before, it's a revelation. And that's what it felt like, especially watching the first half. It felt like a guy who could get anywhere he wanted on the court, and once he got there, could do anything he wanted to once he got to that spot. So, I mean, let's keep it in season. We'll talk about the offseason in the offseason. But for right now, this makes the Knicks a much more interesting team going into the postseason. It absolutely does. Because the other part of it is, and this will kind of, we'll talk about McCall too. Like, this is not, oh, he's doing this against this defensive coverage, but he won't be able to do this against that defensive coverage. No. What OG's doing is translatable to anything. So I think it has to start with him. And then Karl-Anthony Towns. This is probably a stat that only I find interesting, but I find it interesting, and I'm the one in front of the microphone, so I'm gonna say it. This was Karl-Anthony Towns' fourth game of the season in which he has had at least 30 points scored on 15 or fewer shots. He had 31 points on 15 shots against Toronto. He had 30 points on 15 shots against the Nuggets, and he had 32 points on 12 shots against the Timberwolves. Those are all blowout wins for the Knicks. Today was a blowout win. This is his fourth such game of the season. There is no other player in the NBA who has had even 3 such games. So he has literally twice as many, at least 30 points on 15 or fewer shots games than anybody else in the league. So I find that pretty cool. Super efficient performance from Karl. Hasn't been as loud as OG in terms of what he has done without Brunson, but there has been a big significant change in his game as well. And shout out to Benji Ridholtz. He wrote about it in his grade book of the last 2 games. Yeah, Karl-Anthony Towns is working his butt off for some of these points. He's putting his head down. He's getting into the paint. He's making tough shots. He is doing a little more traditional posting up, backing guys down further into the paint than we're used to seeing. Especially when teams are like, yeah, we're just going to switch on you and we're going to dare you to beat it. And more, Karl-Anthony Towns is like, all right, if this is what I got to do, this is what I got to do. And the mentality for him with Brunson out to take on that load. I know OG Anunoby has been the biggest story in Brunson's absence. I would probably, offensively at least, I would have to give Cat the MVP of the non-Brunson games. You want to give it to OG? That's fine. You could even probably talk yourself into Bridges for some of the really high-end games he's had. I'm going to give it to Cat because when you combine what he has done with the ball with everything that he does just by being out on the court, and he doesn't need to touch the ball, and he could still have a massive impact on a game. So great job by him. Nice job by Mikal Bridges today. I mean, kind of lost in the shuffle with Cat and OG, but 20 points on 13 shots, an efficient game for him, 5 assists. A lot of talk about what this looks like when Brunson comes back. You've heard me say it a few times. Benji said it a bunch. I'm not worried about OG. It's Bridges is the guy who, are they going to get him more like, can he just continue to work off the ball and benefit from all of these other guys being out there in that way? Can he hit his catch and shoot threes? Can he be willing to take his catch and shoot threes? He only took 3 3-pointers today in 33 minutes. Those numbers have gone down. It'll be interesting to monitor that. So, but good game from Bridges. I mean, it was a good game from everybody. Josh Hart had a near triple-double, made both of his threes, shot them with confidence. DeLon Wright, we could talk about him and whether he has done enough to warrant some consideration for postseason minutes. Him getting the start today with campaign back, you could read that one of 2 ways. I'm reading it that Thibodeau, and we've seen this in the past, likes to keep guys in their roles as much as possible. So rather than have Campaign start and have DeLon Wright be the backup, especially since DeLon Wright has been starting. We'll just keep DeLon Wright in the starting lineup, and then have Campaign inhabit his usual role, which is backup. And he was a little rusty today. He only made 1 of 5, but I thought Campaign played very well. Drew a nice offensive charge. So that was good. Shamet, 4 of 10 from 3, but like his makes felt really big in the moment. It was when the Knicks were making this push to separate themselves from Atlanta and really turn this thing into a laugher towards the end of the second quarter. It felt like he made a few in there. Precious had his usual assortment of good moments and not so good moments, and we'll just leave it at that. Look, here's the big takeaway. The big takeaway is that last season, when Jalen Brunson didn't play basketball, the Knicks fell apart. They were minus 4.8 points per 100 possessions in 1,220 minutes without Jalen Brunson on the floor. They didn't have to play that many games without Brunson in total, but the ones that they did have to play without Brunson, they lost most of those, other than that very, very memorable win in Cleveland, which was one of their best wins of the season. But again, minus 4.8, and even the bigger number than that, they only managed to score 104.2 points per 100 possessions without Brunson on the floor. That's atrocious. I mean, that's the worst. No, that's like worse than the worst team in the league in terms of scoring. This year, without Jalen Brunson on the court, the New York Knicks are outscoring teams. This is according to NBA.com stats by 5.8 points per 100 possessions, and they are managing to have an offensive rating of 114.0. So their offensive rating without Brunson has gone up by about 10 points per 100 possessions from this year to last year. Karl-Anthony Towns has obviously played the vast majority of those minutes, and he deserves a ton of credit for that. But I think as you are moving forward into these playoffs and moving forward past this season and thinking about, what is this Knicks team? Like, what can they get to? What are they ultimately? I think that's a really encouraging number because it is a reminder that there is a ton of talent on this team. And a lot of the focus on this season has been how that talent fits together and whether the sum of that talent is greater than the sum of the parts, or whether the totality of that talent is greater than the sum of the parts. And I think the book is still out on that, especially since, we haven't seen Brunson in a while. So we got to figure out what it looks like now with him coming back. But there is a ton of talent here. Maybe it needs some rejiggering this summer, but it's not like, if they do some of that, like, if they send out a major piece, well, it's not like that. Like there's still there's going to be a ton of talent regardless moving forward, even if they make a few more moves here. And it is really all about just getting the right combination. So that's the big takeaway here. I think, again, on maybe the last day, Jalen Brunson doesn't suit up. Last thing, I would be remiss if I did not say at least a few words about Tom Thibodeau. Passes Pat Riley for fourth most wins in Knicks history. And of course, there's a Thibodeau angle to this game, which is that the Knicks were up by 20, I don't even know how many points, 20-something points. I mean, that they had not been scoring in the fourth quarter, certainly, and Tom Thibodeau still has nightmares about whatever T-Mac did to him in his sleep one fateful night. OG Anunoby re-entered this game with 6 minutes and 4 seconds left, and the Knicks were up by 27 points. It is the most Thibodeau thing ever because Thibodeau is insane. And I say that with all the love in the world. And I mean that as much as a compliment as I do as not. And it's because he comes from the school of Pat Riley. And Pat Riley, a man who famously once nearly drowned himself in a pool, a little like kiddie pool or something, to show his players how far they had to go, how far they had to be willing to push themselves to become NBA champions. Like everything Tibbs is where do you think it comes from? May not have come directly from Riley, but like he was under Van Gundy for all those years. And where do you think Van Gundy, Van Gundy was very much his own man before he got to, or before Riley came to New York, but there's a lot of similarities there too. And it just all comes down to anything to win. Anything to win. Winning comes first. And now I'll go back to the comments he made after the game, and everybody should go, and I retweeted it before, so go listen to the whole soundbite. Shout out to New York Basketball for clipping it. Fred Katz asked a question basically about like, how are these guys going to adjust now that Brunson's coming back? And Tibbs was like, whoa, like the game tells you what to do. Like, what are you talking about? And then Fred pushed back a little bit and was like, well, for example, OG Anunoby used to have to go space to the corner. He's been doing, and Tibbs like cut him off. He's like, first of all, that's not true. Second of all, the corner is the most valuable spot. And he kept going on and on and on. And Tibbs just very clearly took issue. But the reason he did that isn't because he was like, because Fred Katz asked a bad question, because it was not a bad question. It was a great question. But it's because Tom Thibodeau nothing offends him more than the notion that anything is more important than the team. That's why he gets mad at the minutes conversation, because the minutes conversation inherently is, well, there's something that is coming before what you need to do for the team to win. Obviously, other people have different opinions about that, and pushing guys all these minutes, well, indirectly or sometimes directly, may prevent your team from winning. But the point is the same, which is that it's all the man cares about. So he went on this whole thing about the game tells you what to do. It doesn't matter who's back and who's in uniform and who's doing what. Like, if there's two on the ball, you make the pass. If you just make the right read, game tells you what to do. And he believes it to his core. And that's why he is now fourth alone on the all-time franchise win list. And look, I don't think he's got a Hall of Fame. He certainly doesn't have a Hall of Fame case right now, but I will point out, he is now 79 games. Actually, sorry. He is now 80 games over 500 for his NBA career. There are only 18 other coaches who are at least 80 games over 500 for their NBA career. Every single one of those coaches who has coached at least 1,000 games, and Tom Thibodeau has coached 993 NBA basketball games. Every other one of those coaches who has coached at least 1,000 games is in the Hall of Fame, with the exception of Eric Spoelstra and Doc Rivers, and both of those guys will walk into the Hall of Fame in their sleep. Now, needless to say, all of those guys also have more decorated postseason resumes than Tibbs, and even the very few that haven't had like a conference championship or an NBA title, like, Don Nelson, I think, is the only one on that about ahead of him who does not have at least a conference championship. Don Nelson also is, what is he? Second all time in wins. So it's not it's a little bit of a cherry picking of stats, but the fact remains 80 games over 500 for a career is just not something a lot of coaches have done. And, Tibbs, for better or worse, he has made this franchise over in his image. And he's going to have a chance to add to that resume this postseason with a team that, again, the talent is there. The talent is there. If that wasn't clear watching today, you can't make it any clearer. And now you're bringing back an MVP level player into this mix. Talent is there. Can they continue to play, as Tibbs would say, in a way where they're just doing whatever the game tells them to do? And, we'll see. We'll see. A lot of people have already kind of written them off. I'm curious to see what we get